The low rumble of a motorcycle echoed through the quiet desert highway, the engine's steady growl a lone sound against the backdrop of the fading evening sun. Jake Carter had been riding for hours, the endless stretch of road giving him too much time to think. The past had a way of creeping in when the world around him was silent, memories surfacing like ghosts he could never quite outrun. Up ahead, a neon sign flickered weakly against the darkening sky. Ruby's Diner, open 24/7. A small roadside joint, the kind that smelled of burnt coffee and greasy burgers, where truckers and drifters shared space with the occasional town local. Jake wasn't picky. He just needed a place to stop, clear his head, and maybe grab a bite before heading back on the road. He pulled into the gravel lot, his bike's tires crunching as he parked near the entrance. As he swung his leg over and straightened up, he instinctively adjusted the worn leather jacket he'd been wearing for years. Faded military patches adorned the sleeves, their colors dulled by time but still unmistakable to those who knew what they meant. Inside, the diner was half empty. A few scattered patrons sat in booths, forks scraping against ceramic plates. A tired-looking waitress behind the counter barely glanced up as he stepped inside, her hands busy wiping down a coffee-stained menu. The scent of bacon grease and old linoleum filled the air. Jake took a seat at the counter, nodding at the waitress as she approached. "Coffee black," he said, his voice gravelly from the road. She gave a small nod and turned to pour him a cup, the coffee steaming as she slid it in front of him. "You from around here?" she asked, though her tone suggested she already knew the answer. "No," Jake replied simply, taking a slow sip. The door swung open behind him with a loud bang. The atmosphere in the diner shifted instantly, tension creeping into the air. A group of 6 men strode in, their boots heavy against the checkered tile floor. The Hell Reapers. Jake didn't need to turn around to know who they were. He could read the change in the room, the way the waitress stiffened, the way a man at the corner table quickly dropped his gaze to his plate. Biker gangs weren't uncommon in these parts. They came through small towns like storm clouds, leaving chaos in their wake. The Hell Reapers were worse than most. Reckless, violent, men who thrived on intimidation. And from the way they carried themselves, Jake could tell they'd had a few drinks before rolling in. The leader, Rex, a thick-necked brute with a snake tattoo slithering up his arm, leaned against the counter just a few seats down. His voice was loud, cocky. Well, what do we have here?" he muttered, glancing at Jake with a smirk. "Looks like we got ourselves a lone rider." Jake didn't respond. He'd dealt with men like this before, too many times to count. The best move was usually to ignore them, let their egos run their course. But Rex wasn't the type to be ignored. He nudged his elbow into the guy next to him. "Hey, Slim, you ever seen an old man still trying to play the tough guy?" Jake took another sip of coffee, steady as ever. Rex's smirk widened. "What's wrong, Grandpa? Cat got your tongue?" One of the other bikers, Axel, the youngest of the group, shifted uncomfortably. "Come on, Rex, leave the guy alone. He's just having a drink." Rex ignored him. Instead, he leaned in closer, eyes narrowing at Jake's sleeve. "Hey, what's that?" He reached out, fingers grazing the faded patch on Jake's jacket. And then he laughed. "Would you look at this?" Rex said, turning to his crew. "The old-timer thinks he's a soldier." Jake finally set his coffee down, slow and deliberate. He turned his head just slightly, locking eyes with Rex for the first time. For a moment, something flickered in the gang leader's expression. Something unsteady. Jake's voice was calm, low, dangerous. "You don't want to do that." The diner fell silent. The weight of those words hung in the air like an unspoken warning, thick and suffocating. But Rex was too arrogant to see it. With a sneer, he grabbed Jake's jacket, and in that instant, everything changed. The diner's air grew heavy with silence, the kind that precedes a storm. Jake Carter barely moved as Rex's fingers curled around his jacket, yanking him forward slightly. "I said," Rex sneered, his breath hot and thick with beer. "What's this little patch supposed to mean?" The other bikers chuckled, watching like a pack of wolves circling their prey. Even the patrons in the diner, too afraid to intervene, kept their heads down, pretending not to see what was happening. Jake remained still, controlled, a coiled spring, waiting. "Let go," he said quietly. Rex let out a barking laugh. "Or what? You gonna call the VA on me, old man?" Jake's fingers twitched. A flicker of warning flashed through his sharp gray eyes. But Rex was too dumb to notice. Instead, he pushed harder. "See, here's the thing, Grandpa. We own this town, and we don't like strangers rolling in and acting like they—" He never finished that sentence. In one swift motion, Jake's hand shot up, grabbing Rex's wrist in an iron grip. The biker leader's laughter choked off into a pained gasp. Jake twisted the wrist sharply, so fast and precise that Rex dropped to one knee with a grunt, his arm bent at an unnatural angle. The diner erupted into chaos. No! One of the bikers lunged forward, but before he could reach, Jake moved. His elbow smashed into Rex's nose, crack, sending the big man sprawling onto his back. The other bikers surged in, but Jake was already in motion. The first one, Slim, swung a wild punch. Jake ducked, sidestepped, then delivered a brutal strike to his ribs. A sickening crunch followed as Slim staggered backward, winded. Another biker, Hawk, tried to grab Jake from behind. Bad mistake. Jake twisted free, snatching Hawk's arm and flipping him over his shoulder. The gang member hit the linoleum hard, gasping for air. The fourth biker, Tank, pulled a knife. Jake's eyes darkened. A knife? Tank lunged. Jake caught the attacking arm mid-swing, redirected the force, and twisted the knife from the man's grip in a blink. With a flick of the wrist, he flung the weapon across the room, where it clattered behind the counter. The last standing biker, Axel, hesitated. The kid's hands were shaking. His eyes flicked between Jake and his fallen crew. Jake could see it. The uncertainty. The doubt. He wasn't like the others. Rex groaned, blood streaming from his nose, pushing himself up onto his elbows. He looked up at Jake with pure rage. "Kill this son of a B****, he roared at Axel. Axel didn't move. Jake took a slow step toward him, his boots echoing in the stunned silence of the diner. "Son," Jake said, his voice as calm as ever, "if you make the wrong choice right now, you're going to regret it for the rest of your life." Axel swallowed hard. His fingers twitched at his side, but he didn't reach for a weapon. "Axel!" Rex growled. "Do it!" Jake's gaze never wavered. And then Axel dropped his fists. "I'm not doing this," he muttered, stepping back. Rex snapped. "You cowardly little—" Rex grabbed a beer bottle from the counter and lunged at Jake. Jake reacted instantly. One clean motion. His palm shot up, colliding with Rex's wrist mid-swing. The bottle shattered from the impact, spraying glass everywhere. Before Rex could recover, Jake's fist slammed into his jaw. Rex crashed into the counter, knocking over a stack of plates. His head lolled sideways, out cold. The diner fell completely silent. The waitress stood frozen behind the counter, clutching a coffee pot. The other customers, wide-eyed, barely breathed. The Hell Reapers lay scattered on the floor, groaning in pain. And Jake? Jake Carter calmly reached down, grabbed his coffee, and took another sip, as if nothing had happened. Axel was the first to speak. "Holy **T. He took a cautious step closer, eyes scanning the patch on Jake's sleeve. Now that he had a second to actually process it, he recognized the symbol. It was faded but unmistakable, a skull with two crossed blades beneath it. Axel's breath caught in his throat. His face went pale. "Reaper 1, he whispered. The other bikers stiffened. Even Slim, still gasping from his broken ribs, froze. Jake glanced at Axel, his expression unreadable. "Excuse me?" Axel took another step back, shaking his head. You're Jake Carter, Ghost Reaper 1. The name hung in the air like a death sentence, and suddenly, everything made sense. The effortless takedowns, the inhuman reflexes, the unshakable calm under pressure. This wasn't just some old man. Jake Carter was a living legend, a former operative from one of the most elite Black Ops units in military history. The Ghost Reapers were whispered about in military circles. A shadow unit, trained for missions so dangerous, so classified, that even the Pentagon denied their existence. Only a handful of men had ever survived being a Reaper. Jake was one of them. Axel turned to his fallen leader, realization dawning in his eyes. "Rex," he croaked, "we just attacked a goddamn ghost." Rex groaned but barely moved. The others remained dead silent. Nobody reached for a weapon. Nobody tried to get up. Because now, they understood. They had just picked a fight with the wrong man. Jake sighed, rubbing the back of his neck. "You boys done?" he asked, his voice quiet, but carrying enough weight to make it clear there was only one right answer. Axel nodded rapidly. Yes, sir. Slim groaned, clutching his ribs. I think I'm dying. You're not, Jake said flatly. Rex stirred, still too dazed to form words. Jake finished his coffee. He set the cup down and adjusted his jacket, making sure the patch was still visible. Then, he looked around the room. The waitress, still holding the coffee pot, met his eyes. You okay, ma'am? She blinked, stunned. Yeah. Jake nodded. Good. Then, finally, he turned back to the gang. You listen to me, and you listen good. His voice was steady, cold as steel. You walk out of this diner, and you tell every damn lowlife gangbanger and wannabe tough guy you meet. Never lay a hand on a veteran again. Silence. Then slowly, one by one, the Hell Reapers nodded. Jake exhaled, stretching his shoulders. Good talk, he muttered. Then, without another word, he turned and walked out the door. The bikers watched him go, not one of them daring to follow. And when Jake Carter mounted his motorcycle and rode off into the night, not a single one of them dared to stop him. Little did they know, this wasn't over yet. The roar of Jake Carter's motorcycle echoed through the lonely highway, the distant glow of the diner fading behind him. The desert stretched endlessly on either side, the night swallowing up everything but the hum of his engine and the thoughts running through his head. He had been in situations like this before. Outnumbered, underestimated, forced to remind men who thought they were untouchable that they weren't. But this was different. The Hell Reapers weren't trained soldiers or terrorists. They were reckless, misguided boys playing at war. And something told him this wasn't the last he'd see of them. Inside the diner, the Hell Reapers were still reeling. Rex was propped up against a booth, his nose still bleeding, his expression somewhere between fury and humiliation. The others were battered, bruised, and dead silent. Axel sat on a bar stool, staring at the counter, his mind still replaying everything he had just seen. Slim, groaning as he clutched his ribs, finally broke the silence. Dude, he gasped. What the hell just happened? Rex wiped the blood from his nose and shot him a venomous glare. We got jumped by a freaking senior citizen. That's what happened. Axel snapped his head toward him. A senior citizen? You didn't just pick a fight with some old dude, Rex. That was a ghost reaper, a real one. Rex scoffed, but there was an edge of doubt in his voice. So what? Some military guy who used to be tough? He's old now. He's nothing. Axel turned in his seat, locking eyes with Rex. His voice was quiet but firm. Then why are you still shaking? The tension in the room thickened. Rex glared, but he didn't answer. Because the truth was, he was shaking. Not just from pain, but from something worse. Fear. A few miles away, Jake slowed his bike and pulled off onto a secluded dirt road, stopping beneath an old gas station's flickering neon light. He took off his helmet, rubbing his jaw, thinking. He knew the look in Axel's eyes. The kid was teetering on the edge, one foot in a life of crime, the other in a world where he could still get out. And Rex? Rex was dangerous because he was a man with something to prove. That kind of man was reckless, willing to risk everything just to save face. Jake had seen it too many times before. He had a choice to make, walk away for good or make sure this was finished. His gut told him this wasn't finished. Just as he swung his leg over his bike to leave, the rumble of approaching motorcycles made him pause. He reached instinctively for his knife. Old habits never died. But he didn't draw it yet. A single bike pulled into the station lot, its rider stepping off slowly. Axel. Jake leaned against his bike, watching as the younger man approached, his face uncertain. For a long moment, neither spoke. Then, Axel sighed and rubbed the back of his neck. Look, I know you probably don't want to see me again, but I had to find you, Axel said. His voice wasn't cocky or defensive anymore. It was conflicted. Jake didn't respond. He just waited. Axel exhaled, shaking his head. I don't know what I'm doing, man. I don't know what the hell I'm even supposed to do after tonight. But I know one thing, I don't want to end up like Rex. Jake studied him. The kid was scared, but he was searching for something. Then don't, Jake said simply. Axel let out a bitter laugh. It's not that easy. The Reapers, you don't just walk away from them. Rex, he's not going to let this go. I know him. He hesitated. And he's looking for you. Jake's expression didn't change. Figured as much. Axel hesitated before stepping closer, lowering his voice. I'm trying to tell you, he's getting back up. He's calling in other chapters. They're gonna come after you, man. They're talking about putting you in the ground. Jake took a deep breath, looking up at the night sky. He wasn't surprised. Men like Rex never let things go. But it wasn't fear that settled in his chest. It was certainty. This wasn't over, and he needed to make sure it ended on his terms. 2 nights later, Rex and his reinforcements showed up. Jake was ready. He had chosen the location, a deserted industrial yard on the outskirts of town, a place where no cops would come and no civilians would get hurt. Rex had called in over a dozen bikers from other chapters, all eager to take down the man who had humiliated them. The headlights of their motorcycles cast long, eerie shadows over the cracked pavement. Jake stood in the center of it all, calm as ever. Axel stood beside him. A choice had been made. You sure about this, kid? Jake asked quietly. Axel nodded. I can't keep pretending I don't know where this road ends. Jake exhaled slowly. All right. The roar of engines died down as Rex stepped forward, his face still bruised from their last encounter. But now, there was something uglier in his eyes. Rage. Hate. This is how it ends for you, old man, Rex growled. Jake cracked his knuckles. You keep saying that. Then, the fight began. And it wasn't even close. Jake moved like a ghost, slipping between the bikers, using their own momentum against them. He disarmed one, broke another's nose with an elbow, and took down 2 more before they even knew what hit them. Axel held his own, taking on the gang members who had once been his brothers. One by one, the bikers fell. Until finally, only Rex remained. Breathing hard, he staggered forward, hate burning in his eyes. Jake stood there, waiting. Rex roared and charged, and Jake ended it with one final, devastating punch. The gang leader collapsed to the ground, defeated. Silence followed. The other bikers, the ones still conscious, slowly began backing away. Jake Carter had broken them. As the dust settled, Jake turned to Axel. You did good, kid, he said. Axel exhaled, looking around at the wreckage of his old life. Then he met Jake's gaze. What now? Jake smirked. That's up to you. Axel nodded, the weight of his decision settling in. I think I'll stick with you, for a little while at least. Jake chuckled. Guess I could use some company. They both turned toward the open road, the future uncertain. But for the first time, Axel had a real choice. Jake fired up his bike. Let's ride! And with that, they disappeared into the night, leaving the Hell Reapers and the past behind them.